Fear lives in the solar plexus, and solar plexus is about identity and self-esteem and this who am I? Because when you step into this...
My guest today is Shobana Cooke. She's the holistic medicine practitioner whom I met during my recent trip to the magical island of Sri Lanka.
When I think about the role of women in Sri Lanka, you have to remember we had the first female prime minister in the world.
Really?
We talk about the luxury of being able to follow our true calling and how it depends on the support of other people in our lives.
Following your passion in that situation may seem like the most selfish thing to do.
And how in our fast-paced, technology-driven world, biology, especially for women, dictates its own terms.
You can run, you can fly, and yes, we can do all those things, but the biology...
Please subscribe and like and enjoy this episode of The Rema Show.
When we first met, when you did the tarot reading for me, and I've asked you about, whether you'll be willing to take part in this podcast, and I told you what it's about, women who found their calling, you started talking about a really important thing, which I haven't really touched, and it was that conditions should be right, for a person to really dive into what your heart is telling you is right for you. Can we talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. And I feel like that's such an important one, the luxury of being able to follow your passion. I think that's what we were talking about. And sometimes we might be so passionate about something, but we have to pay the bills, we have so many responsibilities, and following your passion in that situation may seem like the most selfish thing to do because, what's going to happen about the other parts of your life. And especially, I think of it a lot in terms of in the medical healing profession. It's such a fine line between, yes, this is your job and you do this and you get remunerated, but it's also people's feelings, people's lives. They come to you at their most vulnerable, and somewhere between what is fair and how do you charge when their life is falling apart. Like that's the luxury of not having to see every patient with a price tag, because you're working, let's say, in a center, the center wants to be paid X percentage, there are all these pieces. So I think sometimes people are in a position to pay, sometimes people are not, but if they're not, it doesn't mean they shouldn't have access still to the same practitioners. So as this big wellness wave, and it's this, multi-billion-dollar industry today, and everyone's sort of jumping on it.
You mean the wellness?
The wellness, the well-being, these very expensive yoga mats and yoga clothes and centers, and the class is expensive. I'm not sure in the end then who we serve. And I think, yes, it's great that businesses are able to thrive around it, but we have to also be really mindful as practitioners that we still offer things that are community-based, that not everything is about the money. So I think that was the thing I was saying about the luxury, that someone has made it possible and said, it's okay, you go follow your dream.
Yeah.
If you decide to see only patients for no money, it's okay, like you'll still eat. That's because someone else was willing to work to do that. So I'm aware that if you were on your own completely, then it's a hard thing.
So in your case, that was possible for you because someone else was helping you
I would
out.
say yes. I would say my mother said, you know what, I would babysit, you can go see your patients in the evening, my bills were paid, I could come home, I had a nice meal, so many elements of it to allow you to go out and do this, right?
I absolutely agree with you. For me, my calling at the moment is creating this podcast. That's why I'm doing it. And I knew it some years ago that this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to go and talk to women. I wanted to bring these stories out there, create a channel where we can hear inspiring stories. But the timing was never right, you know. It was always, but how am I gonna? It doesn't pay, you know. I have to do the work that pays, and then you're stuck. You're stuck, and you're not happy until well, in my case, I just decided that's fine that it doesn't pay now, but it makes me feel so good. It makes me feel that I'm doing the right thing.
Right.
And that's important. But I agree, so many obstacles.
So many. And recently I met somebody who, I think they had a career in real estate or something like that. And they had decided to go into the holistic side of things, and they had spent a lot of money because these courses, they're expensive, whatever, and I guess they were still looking at it as a ROI, what the return on this investment they had made for a career change in this point, because they thought they could work longer, and they'd hit this wall because they were like, oh, but like I can't always make this money back, like, you know, my patient is now redundant, they can't pay me, you know, but do I stop? All these things that were getting in the way, and I said to her, I feel like, you know, you can't do it full time. Like, this passion thing has to be a part-time thing, just so that then you have both your feet on the ground and you can do it in the way you want. Because that's the other thing, right? Like, how do you want to work with your passion? And maybe there are people you'd want to speak to that have very important things to say, but they might not be the ones that would get the most listeners. Like, how do you, but you need to be authentic to your calling, why you want to do these things. And so I think we have to somehow
find the right balance.
Find that balance.
What about the fear? I would say that in my journey, fear was a big factor, you know, just fear to start, like fear to be like, this is it, you know, sometimes, and I did get a bit of help from the community of women that I'm part of, and we're kind of supporting each other. But I would say that, but once you've stepped through that big obstacle, which is fear, and fear can come in so many forms.
And fear is also, when I think of it in terms of chakras, fear lives in the solar plexus, and solar plexus is about identity and self-esteem and this who am I. Because when you step into this, you also shed, you shed all this stuff about people knowing you in a certain way.
Absolutely.
You know, that, and that version of you sometimes may die. She may not be able to coexist with the passion part, or might have to diminish. And I think a lot of the fear is that, like, I'm going to give up an identity to take on this thing.
Absolutely.
Then where am I? Like, who am I?
Do you have that fear when you were making this choice to go with?
I had it the other way. I felt like for me it was the other things I was trying to do. Never, like, I felt like I had to act it out, like I had to run with it, and hopefully it would catch up and I would feel it. Whereas when I found this, I was just like, oh, I don't have to do that anymore. It was like a huge relief.
It feels like coming home.
Like it was, so it felt like coming home, but I needed so much help to be able to do this. And I was willing to, I guess, to ask for the help to do it, because I couldn't have done it alone. Whereas the other things, I could go out and do it, I could do it alone, but I wasn't happy. I just, I felt like I was acting some role, but I wasn't quite feeling it. Whereas now I feel like, okay, this is how I think, I can align all of it, I'm comfortable with it. And yes, it's not going to afford me X, Y, and Z, but I'm okay. I'm okay with that. It'll all work out.
Yes.
Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know how it works out, but it works out. And I've seen sometimes, it's a funny thing when you're, I think, sincere and it's your passion, you know, like that line from The Alchemist where the universe conspires to support you. I see it all the time, that things rearrange for me to continue to be able to do what I love to do.
And what can you say to, because I really want this podcast to be inspiring for young women, even though I feel that now with this technology, social media, like things have changed a lot. Then I don't know, for me to find this kind of self-discovery, because you always match things with how it was for you, right?
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, what can you tell as an advice to young women who are full of fear, you know, I don't know, taking into account this solar plexus and chakra and identity, like what you've just talked about. What can you say to young women who are trying to make a decision? You know, they feel what they want to do, but maybe something else is expected from them.
Yeah, this is a big one because, okay, this might be also a controversial one, because I really feel like we've also sold a bit of a redundant dream to girls with this, you can run, you can fly, and yes, we can do all those things, but the biology is really important, and our biology is different to our male counterpart. And our menstrual cycles, the cycles in our lives, you know, to have kids, to not have kids, those decisions are big ones. And I feel like in this race of achieve, do, you can do, which yes, you can, I find so many girls then in their 30s now struggling because they're at a certain point in their career and they've achieved. And if they go with their passion to have a family, then what do you do with this career? If you can't come off the track, you don't always come back and keep going. You might fall 5 rungs down. And I think for women especially, I think we need to remember that, like, how can I be all the versions of me and like make this beautiful bouquet and be able to hold it? And it might not be going off only in one linear direction. It might be a different kind of flow. And I see this a lot. Like, so that's one of the things, not to say that you can't do, you can, but what is the trade, like at what cost to you? I find so many women I meet who are in the corporate world, they've gone to great universities, they're super smart, they've achieved so much, but they're really sad. And they're really sad because what they really want is something simpler, but they got on this track.
Right,
you
so
know?
interesting. But it's maybe they're doing what's expected in this time that we live. As you're saying, like overachievers. You can be a superwoman. You can do this and that.
Yes.
But it's also okay to want simple things in life.
And also, it's those simple people in all our lives who make it possible. Like, we all take turns to let someone go out in front, right? But you know, this superstar kid, like when you, I don't know, you had a reading challenge in school, you read 10 books, you get a star, whoa, great. And then you train children to respond to this, a prize at the end of everything. But no one gives you a prize when you're an adult, right? You gotta wash the dishes, look after the kid didn't sleep, your marriage, your friends, you know, so many things. There's no star. But what is realistic for you? Like, can you do all of this? Like, is it better if you stayed closer to family? Because actually you can help each other. But on those achieve tracks, sometimes it means going off way out on a journey, and suddenly you're like, okay, I've hit the place, like I've done my thing, but oh shit, there's no one I connect with.
Yes.
And I think those are important conversations in the Achieve, that at what cost.
So maybe kind of don't forget about your biology and what your kind of needs are, and just be honest with what your body is telling you.
What your gut is telling you, right? Because even things like food, sometimes in this having to go achieve, run a race on a global scale, meet those milestones, you might find yourself in totally different environments. Some people are okay with that. Some people don't thrive. Like, they're eating, but they're not being nourished. There's food. It's not that they're in a place where there's a famine, but why are they not thriving? But then where they came from doesn't have a lot of food, but somehow they look more vibrant. Do you know what I mean? There's what you feel, and I think that honoring what you feel and to listen to the subtle things, like the body doesn't lie. The body really tells. And I feel, having worked in this area for some time now, that talk therapy,
which therapy?
Talk therapy is important, just to
What
identify, like you go to a therapist, psychologist, you talk about your issues, and it's great to identify where the problems are, but actually it's when you work with the body directly that you rework it. So if it is dance, or if it is massage, or if it is, I don't know, yoga or exercise, but actually when you work acupuncture directly with the body, the attention goes to these places. Otherwise the mind comes and tells all these things, but depends on what it feels at the time.
Not just exercising, because of course a lot of people find a bit of a relief in exercising, and you feel good, it makes you feel good, but maybe not enough, just listening more to your body.
It's the subtle listening, like when your feet are tired, or why do they get that chronic pain when you come from visiting the office, or there are little signs, and then you're like, oh, I just take a Panadol and I carry on, but your body is saying, hello, I don't like this, but you're like, you can do it.
Wear the heels. 10 inches.
Wear the heels. Exactly. Wear the heels.
Shobana, there's so much I want to ask you about the role of women in Sri Lankan society, and I know that we can spend a long time talking about this, because I'm just opening up probably a gate to a really, really big subject. But very briefly, how easy or difficult is it for a woman in Sri Lankan society to find her voice? How big are the pressures from society? Because, okay, I've spent 10 days here. My observations are very on the surface, but I want to hear your perspective on what is it like to be a woman in Sri Lankan society. Is it very patriarchal? Is it very kind of, segregated? Women are in this part of the house and men in this part of the house, and how easy is it to find and to be able to express your voice?
I think that's an interesting question, because in different parts of the country, in different socioeconomics, the voice is different. And when I think about the role of women in Sri Lanka, you have to remember we had the first female prime minister in the world.
Really?
So,
Yes, in the 1960s, 70s, early 70s?
Early 70s, 71,
So,
So we are that country where women can, that's the highest position in the country, and a Sri Lankan woman was the first in the world. So that's to put that into perspective. But at the same time, there are lots of women who are not allowed to eat at the same table as their man. They have to first serve, then they have to clean up, then they will eat. Some choose to, some, the mother-in-laws would be like, no, you can't do it like this. So we have all kinds of dynamics to do with women. And I think the financials and the education. Those are the two areas. So in areas where the education and exposure isn't that of their counterpart in a developed country, then I think, depending on the neurosis of that community or family and wanting to control somebody, they use it to their benefit. So I don't think it's a culturally feminist issue. It's very individual to certain parts, and socioeconomics and access to education is a big one.
So it's not kind of universally accessible education for
We
girls?
we have a universal education system, but it varies. The quality of education in different parts of the country are slightly different, maybe, you know, because of the war, because of access, infrastructure. Personally, I think the access to English makes a big difference, because the ability to think critically, to be open to the world, to learn, comes through English. So very interestingly, the first Prime Minister, who was the woman, her husband was Oxford educated, Mrs. Bandaranaike,
yes.
and very well educated, accomplished lady. And when her husband passed away, he went to Oxford, he had access to English education, he wanted that for his children, but he made a political decision to take that away from the school system in Sri Lanka. And that, I feel, is we have to revisit that as a country.
She did not bring that back when she became the Prime Minister.
Well, she didn't bring it back, and today it's 2024 and no one else has brought it back either. English is on the timetable. It's not that it's not there, but it's not invested in today. We've lost those generations of teachers who grew up speaking English. Like, for example, my grandmother's generation, they learnt in English. And Sinhalese or Tamil was spoken at home, and they did some as a language in school, but the instruction of education was English. So you could go out into the world and you could run whatever race in whatever field, because you on the same playing field.
It's interesting what you said, that this is a kind of means to control, you know, to control population, to control women. One story comes to my mind in Tajikistan, in Central Asia. Once I was doing a story about, was at the time of Prince William getting married, you know, to Prince of Wales now. And we were doing rich wedding and poor wedding for the BBC. So, by the way, the richest wedding was in Sri Lanka, the reporter was doing.
Whoa!
And, yes, and I was doing the poorest wedding in Tajikistan. And this is when I went and I met the couple, and they were getting married. And I just remember NGO people telling me that parents come to them and say, if their daughter wants to go to continue her education after school, parents come to NGOs and like, please help us, she's gone mad, she wants to study more, we just want her to marry. And I think it's so kind of global, you know, this problem with access to education, and it's important to remember that, of course, it's a way of like controlling the population.
It is.
You know.
Because if you had a whole population who could think for themselves, I guess global politics would look different, you know. And so, coming back to your question, I would say no, it's not a struggle for women in Sri Lanka, but it depends on which society she's standing in. And
Class, yeah, like it's a class society, like in the UK.
it is a class, yeah. Yes, but her access, like urban, I would say it's more urban or rural. And
Right.
in an urban setting, no, there's no issue. But in a rural setting, she has to fit sometimes in a box, and she mustn't step out of her
outside the
role.
box.
Yeah.
And one more thing, my sister was telling me that actually in Sri Lanka there are so many strong, inspiring women that they are really moving this country forward, which is
Yes.
very
I think
interesting
so.
too.
Yeah. I think there are very strong women doing amazing things and holding so much together, and they don't get enough credit at all. But I think it's getting, their voices are getting louder, they're not in the shadows, they're more confidently coming forward. Social media in that respect has been such a positive, I think, for women all over the world. But I also think we must be careful to not jump on someone else's track of this achieve ambition road and remember still the biology and the connectivity and what it means, what success means for a woman is slightly different, I think.
And what does success mean to you?
If I can balance out all my roles and that there's a fluidity, that if my kids are home, that I can take time off, if I have the luxury to take that time off and arrange my schedule to suit my needs, for me that's priority. Then I'm like, okay, that's great. I'm not forced to have to work through things that are important, like if it was that I could take time off if I'm sick. That for me, those are the things. And if it is success in financial terms, I think you put the effort in and you get what you get. It's
Yeah?
yeah.
You can't skip it. You have to work, and then you can
Yeah.
get there. Yes.
That's my mindset.
Yeah.
You do your best, you show up, but you can't control it. Look at what happened to the world in COVID. I think, people forecasted, people projected, all the finance teams all over the world couldn't project this. But we all survived, Some of us lost dear ones and families, but as humanity, we're still going on. And I think that we also were the most creative at that time because we had to survive.
We had to stop and figure things out.
Yes.
She was.
Because I have a little business that started as a little experiment, and the brand is 1948, and 1948 is the year of Sri Lankan independence. So my question when I started was about, can we be independent? What is this thing about independence? So everything is sourced here, everything is sourced in Sri Lanka, upcycled, recycled, using whatever I find in the market here for various things. And till COVID, it was mostly a jewelry brand. It was about gemstones, it was about wood and silver. And then during that COVID time, my metalsmiths, no one's wearing jewelry in their home on their Zoom meetings really, and they'd call and they'd be like, miss, I have to put a reload on the phone for my child's tuition class. Everyone wants a reload. And he's like, do you have any work? Do you have any work? And we actually started doing so many more things, a sewing workshop, a recycled paper workshop, soap making, incense, in order to be able to create new markets. And we grew so much in that time.
Amazing.
So I think that adaptability, and we serve whatever is at the moment, like what is asked of us at the moment, right? Like we can't project, because I think if I thought, well, no, I'm a jewelry brand, like, no, sorry, I'm going to close shop because I have no sales. But I actually grew when I just put that aside for now. And the time will come that jewelry
the
may be at the
conditions
forefront.
pushed you to become more creative with what you can.
So much more.
Yes. And it's going well, 1948?
Yes, it's going well. It's small. It can't grow too big because then I'd need a factory. And one thing about working, I think, on this island is you just throw seeds and trees grow, and there is food, and there is a nice, easy lifestyle. So people aren't as focused on delivering things. So in a cottage industry, I can't do big numbers. They'd be like, oh no, the next door neighbors, someone passed away, so the whole village is gone for to cook, and then
so
it's 30
funny.
days, and what do I say to my client in Canada? Sorry, but
I think it happens in so many cultures,
Yeah.
or there's a funeral, that guy's gone for a week.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah.
But and after COVID, it's been so many more women working from home. I see that in my own business, that the sewing people, and I hadn't even met them, or the weavers, it was all WhatsApp, video calls, photos, without even having to go out there. The transport network being down when we went through the financial
So is
crisis.
it mainly women who are working?
Mostly women, and they were the ones who were able to be super creative and make the time, juggle the kids, run their houses, work from home, gather more women, and do this. So
Resilience.
yeah, so success is, I think, when we can do that for each other, right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been so nice, and I would love to continue our conversation. So I hope there will be questions from the listeners, and then we can get back and pick up maybe on some of the issues that we didn't cover.
Of course. Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you,
It was a
Shobana.
pleasure to speak with you.
So nice. Thank you.
And enjoy Sri Lanka.
Yes, it's my last day.
Oh,
Namaste.
I'm so honored to have spent the last morning with you.
Oh, thank you. The
Thank
honor is
you.
mine.